faith in yourself that you will figure it out is the more overriding masculine quality that reveals itself when you say, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out.
Case Kenny is an author, entrepreneur, mindfulness expert, and the host of the very popular podcast, New Mindset. Who's this?
There's still days where I don't want to do it, but for me, like, regret is a powerful compass. I remember doing the podcast and it started to get out and trickle out that Case has this podcast on the side. And I remember I would always diminish it. I would always be like, oh, no, that's just goofy. I'm just playing around and forget about it. I wish I hadn't downplayed it. I wish I had stepped fully into it.
What would you say to yourself? What are some of the things that you wish you'd known?
The one that I come back to that's become a little bit of a soundbite that I repeat because I wish I would have told myself this.
I'm really excited for it, Case. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
So take me back in time. You grew up in Chicago. Was there a moment in time where kind of shaped you as an entrepreneur, as a mindfulness person, like that you are today?
Well, there's a couple different things for sure. I would say the first is on the more material front of like what I do entrepreneurially, but like the substance of it is I've always had a very intense draw to languages. And it only makes sense now at 37 and many career shifts later why that's the case. Like even in high school, I was always really good at Latin. I took 5 years of Latin, took like AP Latin. I don't know if they still teach Latin anymore. Anyway, I was always like strangely good at it and was like one of like 4 people in those classes. And then I went to Notre Dame and I majored in Chinese and Arabic because I was drawn to it. And I frankly wasn't like smart at I tried pre-med because my brother's a doctor and I just like, this is not for me. I took accounting. I was like, it's not for me. So I was always drawn to those things. Pause. And then after I graduated, I went into advertising. It was 2011, still somewhat of a tough job market. And, I was struggling to get a job as a Chinese major. And I ended up getting a job in advertising technology, strategy for Procter & Gamble and at an agency in Chicago. And it was great. And that led to a 12-year career in advertising. And eventually, I worked in advertising technology sales, worked my way up from account executive to regional vice president. I mention all that as background for now being someone who I say I share my feelings for a living. That's what I do creatively. It's what I do entrepreneurially. It's all about language and human emotion. And now it makes sense about how those things came to be. But I think to answer your question, I think sales in particular is what led me down the entrepreneurial path. I wasn't like a lemonade stand kid. I never like really had a huge entrepreneurial drive, but sales will really make you realize what you're capable of, how you could literally start at zero and build something huge, how you could evangelize for a product and maybe even build one better yourself. And so it really opens your eyes. And I think that's what really enabled me at a certain point, because the short version of it is I started my podcast when I was amidst that career because I was trying to know myself better. And
wait, I don't want to. Don't go there. We're gonna go there slowly.
Okay.
Because I think your shifts are actually incredible, but I agree with you on sales. And I think this is actually a really important distinction, because I think even when people really love a certain thing, like you may love mindfulness, etc., they don't realize that they actually going to put a lot of hats on, especially in entrepreneurship. Like you're going to be also the salesperson and the marketing person. And so you can love, a certain thing, but eventually you put different hats on. And if you actually have the sales background, that's incredible.
I talk to a lot of younger people and they're like, oh, I want to do what you do. And I support anyone who has the drive to do something like this. Right. But it really becomes a conversation of, okay, well, are you willing to write every day? Are you willing to promote every day? Right. Are you willing to market every day? Are you willing to keep an up-to-date P&L every day? Are you willing to pay your estimated taxes on time once a quarter? Like the things that you think you escape when you do turn into a creative or entrepreneurial endeavor certainly are there, to your point.
And so take me there. So you have this comfortable career, it pays the bills. Was there a moment that you're saying, you know what, I need more than this? Was there like a certain thing that attached you to, like, what made you do such a shift?
Well, I think it was a couple things. I started the podcast while I was working the job, and I started to build a business while I was working the job. And it gave me some fulfillment, right? Because it wasn't like I was like drained at my job necessarily. To my point, I think it was an incredibly powerful evangelizing part of my life and taught me so much about myself. But I was missing the clarity personally. And then I was also missing, I think, some of the fulfillment of being my own boss and, steering the ship in the direction I wanted. So starting the podcast, starting to write, starting to create some products while I was working that job really started to give me the, some of that itch. And I was scratching that itch and it was great.
But tell me, I'm taking you slower and for a reason. Like our audience want the same thing that you did, but they don't know how to take the first step. So there's a reason why I'm slowing you there because even to create that podcast, when you're not sure what it is that you want, especially clarity. Clarity is something that we're seeing in Leap Academy. I think probably about 80% of the clients that come in have no clue what they want to do next.
Oh, okay.
And deciding what they want is probably one of the hardest things. And making that jump when it's not 1,000% clear that this is what they want to be known for is actually really scary. So how did you start? Like, how did you start doing that podcast?
Yeah, well, I think that's an important context too, because I think people put a lot of pressure on themselves to want to find the thing that will define them and put a label on it as quickly as possible. That was never my intention. Like I started the podcast because I wanted to know myself better. And I was like, well, I can't just read another self-help book and listen to someone else's podcast and call it a day. I was like, that's my frustration because I was so sure in my career about what to do to be successful. But as a person, I was like, I don't have that clarity. So I need to figure this out. So it was a very self-centered, in a good way, endeavor. And I was like, I will figure it out. I never set out to be a professional podcaster. I never set out to be a writer full time. Never. It was not even on my radar, frankly. So
tell me about the first episode. Like, I want to hear that first episode. What do you even talk about?
I wonder what I did, frankly. Probably
I should have looked
honestly,
at.
well, I know in the first 5, I do remember talking about like confidence and like how I was developing confidence and then how I would encourage other people. It was like, well, if I can describe my experience and then share that back simply, maybe that shows that I explain it. That makes a lot of sense because I was feeling unconfident in various areas of life. And I think I turned around and would share that from an I perspective.
How did it not scare you? How did it not scare you to be so vulnerable?
No, it sure did. I mean, I even remember like to my recollection of cringe being like, I was really good at sales and you can make a lot of money in sales and it's very like bling bling and who you know and all that kind of stuff. And I remember doing the podcast and it started to get out and trickle out that Case has this podcast on the side. And I remember I would always diminish it. I would always be like, oh, no, that's just goofy. I'm just playing around and forget about it. Whereas it was important to me. It wasn't important professionally yet, but it was important of why I was doing it. But I would always downplay it to protect myself because it was a vulnerable thing. It was a vulnerable thing emotionally, creatively, but also professionally. It was the opposite of what my career represented, which was put on your business casual, go close the deal, collect your commission, take clients out and entertain them, and swipe the Amex. And it was the opposite of that. So I think, I wish I hadn't downplayed it. I wish I had stepped fully into it. But at a certain point, after I'd been doing it for a while, 50 episodes, 60 episodes. And I was like, wow, people are actually listening to it. I remember my first month of the podcast, I got 57,000 downloads, which is a lot in podcasting land, especially for a first-time podcaster with no real like social presence. And I was like, wow, okay. So some people are caring. And at a certain point, I was like, no, I'm going to step into this. And that's when I adopted the moniker of Case as someone who shares his feelings for a living. And I was like, I'm just going to go hyperbole. If I've been afraid of owning this thing, what would be the pendulum swing all the way to the other side? Case shares his feelings for a living. So I think that really helped me like ownership wise. And then it became the funniest thing too. Like I would go into client meetings. And people were like, oh, your Case, I listened to your podcast. I was like, well, that's freaking cool. Our worlds are colliding. Maybe this isn't something I should hide in my closet after work and do. Like, it became something I was more proud of. And then obviously, things happened after that. But like that shift emotionally was big. And
that's huge. Like, and again, like kudos to you. Like, I think there's like that first step is usually the hardest thing. Yeah. And I think there's also an element like when you don't have a full clarity of what it is that you want to do. First of all, everybody wants to check all the boxes, right? They want the full confidence. Like, I know exactly where I'm going. And that's not how it goes. The thing is that being vulnerable when it's still, there's a little bit of a wound, like it's really, really scary. It's easier to be vulnerable from a scar. So how did that open up for you? Like, was there moments of like, am I kidding me? Like, am I doing the right thing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I still have those every day. I mean, I think one of the great checks and balances in wellness professionally and personally is like, how humble has your work made you become? Like, especially in wellness, that is, people who give life advice or suggest reflection prompts and like these things. Like, the ultimate way to see if someone is doing the work is how humble have they become as a result of their work. Hopefully so. It's unearthed the fact that they don't know a whole lot. And to me, not to sound noble, but I'm very much in that space. The more that I do this thing, mindfulness certainly is a muscle. I've done hundreds of podcast episodes, thousands of quotes and pages. Like, if anything, it's just made me realize how much I don't know, which is a beautiful thing, though. That is a beautiful thing. It has shown me the space that I can fill with clarity and then introduce another space that I could do that with. It's shown me the beauty of in-between moments and transitional phases in life. And to me, that's not an insecurity that you need to cover up with bravado or charisma or ego. It's like a beautiful, beautiful space. In that sense, it's become easier to be like, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to talk about what I think might help me find out the answer. And creating from that place, and also creating expertise from that place, I think is what the world perhaps needs. It's what I need, at least, as opposed to here's the rules, here's things. The ability to reinvent yourself, like leaning on that as opposing to want to have a static identity and figure it out and own it. To me, I think not only is that the gift of life, but it's a requirement of entrepreneurship and, you know, being a creative professional as well.
And again, I think there's an element of, for driven people to admit that they don't know, or, you know, they don't have all the answers is not simple. And maybe I'll say something, I don't want to take it in the wrong way, but I feel like for men, it's almost even harder to admit that they don't know. Am I right? Sure. Is there?
Yeah, because I think certainty and confidence are inherent masculine qualities, as they should be, I suppose. But I think humility amongst that is faith in yourself that you will figure it out, is the more overriding masculine quality that reveals itself when you say, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. So I think that's a higher energy state to operate from.
Amazing. And so was there a moment that kind of like hard moment that, you know, shaped you, or was it a slow thing that you wanted to do? How does that happen?
I mean, no, I think like many things, it's a slow burn, right? You know, it's, you know, for me, it was the frustration perhaps of not knowing myself. It was compounded by unfair self-judgment, pressure to be a certain person, a certain way. You know, I think if you go deeper and deeper into therapy time, there was probably a reflection of just lack of emotional self-sufficiency, my relationship with emotions. So I think all those things combined. But I mean, I'm lucky to have a somewhat type A mentality where I was like, I have this mess of confusion. I need to do something about it. Luckily, that's the way I'm wired versus creating an identity from the confusion. So I think, you know, that pushed me to start. And then that led me, I mean, I've changed course so many times since then, but I think the evolution came from just like that place of frustration.
So you start entrepreneurship. Do you understand that you're starting entrepreneurship? Or again, at that point, I know that you're kind of doing the podcast on the side and you're starting to write, but do you understand like that this is starting to be a whole journey? And when do you actually leave everything and say, okay, this is my time to go all in?
Yeah.
Because at that point you didn't have 1.3 million followers or whatever, and tens of millions of listeners. Like, I think sometimes we compare our beginning to someone else's success.
Well, I think lucky for me, again, you talk about having a why and having the why drive your business and have it be what makes a business sustainable. I never intended to make any money or a career from it. So I did 200 episodes before I was even like, oh, wait a minute, maybe there is a professional future here. So truly, so I think that was really helpful for me. But then, you know, I also am somewhat contrarian. And, you know, luckily I worked in advertising. So like I had a pretty good understanding of marketing, products, e-commerce, creator economy. And I was like, okay, well, people are listening to the podcast. People are starting to care about what I have to say. I was like, well, everyone was like, oh, you should start doing brand deals and make money from sponsors. And I was like, that feels like a low leverage game to get involved in. Right. And it is a fine business model, don't get me wrong, but it is part of a larger wheel. So at the time I was like, okay, well, I'm not in a rush to do this necessarily. I have this other job. Let me think about how I could build something entrepreneurially, a business, instead of just doing what's obvious. You have impressions, monetize the impressions. So I was like, what can I build for people who are interested in what I have to say? And I landed on these guided journals because a lot of my work is around written reflection. And at the time in 2018, I went out and bought a bunch of journals, and I was like, none of these speak to me. These all stress me out. The journals were like, do this, do that, come back later and hold yourself accountable. I was like, man, this is not clarity. This is pressure. And that was at the time. And frankly, at the time in 2018, there weren't that many guided journals, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, maybe I will create my own. So I spent a year just developing my own style of journaling that was a mix of just like clarity and repetition. And I was like, let's just see how this goes. And I did a Indiegogo Kickstarter campaign for it. And frankly, it didn't do that well. It raised, how much did it raise? I think it was $37,000, which is fine, of course. But like I wanted like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, and the way it works with Indiegogo is people back it before and then you send it out. So I used the money I worked with a printer in Canada, designer, a warehouse, a 3PL company to ship them out. It was all very one-to-one. It wasn't like print on demand or a publisher or anything. It was a literal printer in Canada who I would send the files to. They would print it in bulk. So I ordered it was like 3,000 journals. The campaign ended. I sent out the journals to everyone who ordered them, and then I was left with like 1,000 because I was in the hole money at this point. And then COVID hit. This is the COVID timing. And so I just had a lot of time in my apartment in Chicago because I was no longer able to travel for work because I managed a team in the Midwest and managed the whole region. And like we couldn't go and travel, which is a big part of our work. So I was like twiddling my thumbs. So I was like, well, I've got all these journals in a warehouse in Cicero, Illinois. How do I get rid of these things so they're not burning a hole in my wallet? So I just literally just started to post them on Instagram. And at that time, I think I had like 20,000 followers. And I don't know, just something happened. I remember at the time I had my Shopify notifications on my phone and it would go ping, ping. I was like, what? This is crazy. It was like a very baffling moment, frankly, because again, I wasn't entrepreneur e-commerce guy. But frankly, the rest is history from there. I'm happy to go into more detail, but eventually that turned into my life's work before moving more into like book and traditionally published books. But yeah, it was that moment during COVID. And then between 2020 and 2022, I created 3 more SKUs of different journals and I sold like a little close to 300,000 individual units of them. So It blew up.
Incredible. And I will want to go there a little deeper. What did journaling specifically unlock in you that you felt like this should be a tool that you want to stand behind?
Yeah, well, it's the world's favorite question for me because my whole life's work now, I do them for corporate, I do them my own events, is taking people through basically guided journal prompts. Well, I think it accomplishes a couple things, not only taking advantage of the neuroscience of mind and body, but also just the essence of what happens when you sit down and you choose your words carefully. Like when you choose 14, 16, 20 words to describe something, it taps into what I think is the essence of mindful practice, which is mindfulness isn't just listening to yourself. I think we're in an amazing age where we're encouraged to sit still and feel and surrender to your feelings and be non-judgmental of them. Yes, it's an amazing practice. But I think a lot of us skip the second step, which journaling helps bring to light, which is mindfulness is listening to yourself. But mindfulness is also, perhaps most importantly, at least in my world, it's talking to yourself. How do you talk to yourself about the feelings? Specifically, as practical as I could be, what are the words you use to describe your feelings? Not someone else's word, not anxious because someone else uses that word, not unlovable because that's a social media word, not narcissist, not this, not that. What are the words that actually resonate with you? How do we honor our feelings? But then how do we create movement such that we could be optimistic in life? So for me, journaling is the ultimate conduit, not only to self-reflect and become self-aware, but it's frankly like the only way to truly become optimistic in life. That is, the words you use to describe your feelings dictate the way you experience them out in the world. So journaling and sitting down, and I would create these 60-day journals, journaling for 10 minutes a day in response to certain prompts is how you actually create an internal vocabulary that is you, not someone else's, but yours. And it's something I love, and it makes sense to my opening about language, right? Chinese and Arabic and Hindi and Urdu and Latin, and these languages that I've studied and the energy of language. And bringing that to life in a product and people with a pen in their hand, I think is a superpower. And if you could tap into it, I think the only people that are really into internal dialogues nowadays are like athletes. Athletes are very much encouraged to think about how they speak to themselves in light of performance issues. The average person is told to reflect and be honest with themselves and feel what they feel. But there's not a whole lot out there as far as training and guiding about word choice, emotional vocabulary. And that's what I love to do.
Incredible. So for somebody, before we go on, for somebody that never journaled, doesn't even know if it's not a waste of time. Sorry. Like, like just kind of like, just doesn't even like, why on earth do I need to? I mean, I'm a grown up person. Like, what do I like? Journaling is for kids. Tell me a little bit, like, how do you even get started? How do you even start believing in this?
Well, I understand that, first of all, because I think that's how I felt in my 20s. Like, oh, a journal is a diary. A diary is for sad people. Right? It's kind of a common assumption or something. I don't know. That comes from a place of immaturity. But I understand that, a little bit of cynicism. I mean, I think the only way you'll break free of that is to try. And, I think it comes down to like the journal you get, the questions you answer. Because if you adopt a form of journaling where it's like, write 3 things you're grateful for, write 3 things you want to do today, that's not journaling. That is a to-do list. That is productivity. That is reminders. And, I talk about gratitude, about how to truly journal for gratitude. I talk about other different prompts that tap into emotions. Everything that I view is through the lens of contrast. That is, find the contrast in your life that makes you uncomfortable. The transition between full-time job and full-time entrepreneur. The transition between being single and being in a relationship. The transition between being insecure and having confidence. That is the area we have to evaluate. Just writing down things you want to be true and fantasizing about future days is not. I mean, it's great, but it's not gonna open up any breakthroughs for you. So it really is about the prompts that you give yourself, whether it's from a prompt that I've created or your own. And then it's also training that muscle. Like a big part of the work of journaling aligns with a lot of therapeutic approaches, which is how do we unblend parts of ourselves? Because we are complex humans. There are many parts to us, right? We're not just one blob of identity. There's parts from the past that are trying to keep us safe. There's parts in the future that are trying to make us productive. These parts are all competing for harmony within us. And then there's the self, which is the divine, the honest, the bold. And it's our job to restore harmony amongst all those. And the easiest way to do that is with the way you speak to yourself. Such that when you have a feeling, you don't say, I am anxious, the worst way to describe your feelings. And you also don't say, I feel anxious, the second worst way. The best way is to say, a part of me feels anxious. We honor the feeling, and then we do the creative and reflective work to be able to fill in that blank. A part of me feels anxious, and then we fill in that blank with something that speaks to our ability. And that is how I approach journaling. So it's reflection. We're honoring it. We're not sweeping it under the rug, but we're creating space for movement with our emotions and our capacity for change.
Right. That's strong. I get what the difference is, because I think I was more looking at a to-do list. You're right. And I think the beautiful thing is that we do see, some of our clients definitely journal, and what I love about it, what you just said, is that we're probably the worst friend of ourselves, right? Yeah. Like the way we talk to ourselves is something we never talk to anybody, even our worst enemy.
Right.
And I think that's another element that, just stop to think about how you're actually talking to yourself. I think is also a really big part of something that, again, will enable you to create the possibilities that you want to create for yourself. So, but tell me again, like, I think many of our listeners, one of the hardest thing for them is to maintain, like they want to create this multiple facet career, portfolio career, what we call multiple streams of income. Yeah. And you're kind of dreaming that, right? Like you're journaling and books, and we'll talk about it in a podcast. Like you have this like multiple facet things, that you created for yourself. How did you have a vision of what this gonna be, or every time you opened up something, it created something else, and you just kind of leaped into the next thing? How do you think of it?
Well, I think of it as all connected. I think it's a difficult thing if you want to be multifaceted and none of it's connected. That's very
Right.
difficult to have 7 different businesses that do not intertwine and do not gain
Right.
efficiency because of their interconnectedness. I can't imagine trying to run 7 different business models that the only tie is your holding company or something like that. That seems very
Right.
difficult. For me, it's like the podcast is the center of my universe. It's where I get all of my ideas. It's where I get all of my content. It's also the center for promotional efforts. But it's very simple for me now. I do the podcast. I do it twice a week. I've done 730 episodes. I've done it for 7 years, 3 years with SiriusXM. I do the podcast because it's monetizable, but it also gives me ideas. Then the ideas that work, I'll put on social media. Then the posts that do well, I'll turn into a book. And then the book that does well, I'll create event series around it. And then the ones that really do well, I'll develop a product around it. And the ones that I really like, I'll go and work with a brand and we'll put on an event. We'll do an exclusive series together. So it's all connected. For me, the podcast is the center of the universe. And it's not difficult then to add a spoke to it, whether that's my speaking and my events, whether that's my traditionally published books with like a Penguin Random House or a Hay House. Then it's my brand deals where I'm leveraging expertise, right? So I don't sell influence to brands. I sell expertise to brands that's created on the podcast. Then it's investments and consulting with different groups that I angel invest in and I consult with. And then it's individual. If I want to create a SKU that I own, it'll come from that. So to me, it's just the wheel and spokes, and it's very simple. And I think it requires you then hedging your bets a little bit on one thing and saying this is going to be the thing from which everything else will come. And I, don't necessarily have a blueprint for that, but I think if you could figure that out, the multifacetedness will come much simpler because it flows together.
Right. And I love that because again, when we teach portfolio career, we always say you have to have one thing that is relatively stable and the rest create kind of more of a, snowball effect versus throw spaghetti on the wall and, see what sticks. And I love that, this is exactly what you've done. But I do want you to talk about maybe some challenging moments because again, it's not easy to record 700, whatever you said, I looked it up, but, episodes, like it's like, and there's challenges, there's hate, there's things will come your way. Share maybe a moment or two that were, oh my God, this is hard.
Well, yeah, I can give you multiple. I mean, I haven't shared at least 2 very large business flops that I tried to make spokes of that did not work and that were 6-figure losses. No problem. I mean, I think the biggest first challenge I came across when I was scaling the journal business, that, and again, to my point, in 2020, it started to do well. I started to create these other SKUs. I created systems and business around it. I had people working for me. We were doing paid ads. We were doing all the analytics. It was a full-fledged business, stripping out, several tens of thousands of journals a month. And a big part of that was our ability to scale with paid ads. But then when was it? In 2022, 2021, somewhere in there, Apple passed a bunch of new privacy policies and it completely changed paid advertising for small businesses that relied on performance marketing. And I certainly was a victim of that. And it changed everything very quickly. Very, very quickly, because I had a lot of inventory. You would make money, you would buy future inventory. You would make money, you would buy future inventory. Right. You put a little away for yourself, but it's all reinvested. And that was based on your ability to forecast how you can scale organic and paid and the whole thing. And then when paid goes away and you're sitting on 100,000 journals in a warehouse, suddenly the bills add up. And that was a big one. And, it's somewhat of a blessing in disguise because it shifted me away a little bit from that model and more to what I'm doing now, which is an amazing model, which is my traditionally published books, where I don't have any upfront cost, but the promotional strategies are the same, but there's much more upside on a branding perspective and your ability to get your books in retail and a bunch of things that weren't available to me previously. But to answer your question, I remember that one occasion quite specifically when the wheel just stopped spinning at the rate it had, and a lot of people faced the same challenges, and a lot of people overcame it and figured it out. For me, it was a sign to pivot a bit and to diversify a bit, and and here we are now.
And you are coming out with the opposite of settling, which I want you to talk a little bit about it, but it's basically, very aligned with where our clients in Leap Academy, like how do you get, like how do you get that spark, or how do you,
Yeah.
right? So talk about a little bit about it.
Yeah. I mean,
How do you get
there's
everything you want, right? Yeah.
every single thing. There is a large dating component to it, but I won't reference that because the core of the book is about recognizing your spark and realizing that that's the thing that needs to see the light of day in your career, in your arts, and in your relationships. But,
Right.
I talk a lot about, and I borrow from the work of James Hillman, who wrote a book called The Soul's Code, which is basically the idea that we all have something in us, our essence, and it's something special, even though that is a cliche. I think there is something special about everyone, maybe not overtly so, but we all have a special balance of emotions and capacities that mixture of them makes it special. And we could spend a lot of our life burying it, preferring to be normal, preferring to follow a path, preferring to date
Right.
and work in certain ways. But that thing inside of us needs to see the light of day. And we'll realize that eventually, likely looking back, or we can realize it today. And the example in the book is that, we all have this acorn inside of us, and we could plant that acorn in a field and water it, and we can hope that it will become a banana tree because we've been told we need bananas, but it's going to become an oak tree. It has to. It has to be an oak
Right.
tree. There's only one thing. And there obviously is an element of life of being adaptable and, reinventing yourself, but there is something about us, that spark, that piece of pizzazz that needs to see the light of day in our work, in our personal lives, in our romantic relationships. And figuring out what that is could take a long time. And I don't necessarily think we should put pressure on ourselves to be 22 and be like, this is the thing. But I think it's our work and our duty to listen to it and try to figure out what it is and try to bring it to life in many different ways. And that's basically what the book's about, how to do that mindfully, how to use certain psychological ideas to your advantage, and just make sure you can look back without regret in regard to your essence and your spark.
And I love that. And we'll have the links here to pre-order. But I think one of the, I think a lot of our people are trying to find, and, in Leap, we help them find that zone of genius, what I call, but it's like, that is the special sauce. It's kind of that spark, right? But also it's a lot. And this is where I want to tap with you a little bit, Case, because I think a lot of it is based on society expects us to want certain things, or society or parents, or, a lot of it is sometimes dictated by external things. And how do you battle the external things and what people expect you to say or do versus what you truly want, right? Like when I moved from being this business person and investor, etc., to start Leap Academy, I was like, what? You want to be a coach? And, it's like, well, I want to change people's lives, and I want to change thousands of lives. And I'm actually a business person, but this is, but I think it was the hardest thing was to recognize that I'm going to go against what is cool.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I think a couple of different things. I mean, I wrote a book 2 years ago called That's Bold of You, where I talked about conformity and like why we conform. And in general, not with social media and AI, who knows what the actual answer is, but in general, we conform because we don't want to be the odd man out, alienation, or two, we have rationalized that because everyone else is doing something, that clearly is the way forward. It clearly has a group of followers and people are doing it, so clearly success lies on the other side of that. So I've always thought that was an interesting observation. In my new book, though, I also talk about nonconformity as a character trait, right? So maybe in light of I don't want to be the one who's the odd man out, this applies in all scenarios. In the book, I talk about it in terms of romantic attraction, but overwhelmingly so, research shows that non-conforming traits are attractive. Non-conforming. So being slightly different, being weird, being passionate, being intense, the spark. We always think that that's the wrongness about us, whereas overwhelmingly so, it's shown that it is the attractor. And yes, it will turn off the wrong people, but it will attract the right people. So, I mean, I'm not so sure I have an exact answer other than leaning into perhaps some of the observations that say the thing about you that makes you think different or act different, that is the thing that you need to follow, not only because maybe it is attracted to the right people and it's important to surround yourself with the right people, but also like there's a lot of interesting research that shows that like success doesn't come from quantitative measurements. It comes from qualitative differences, right? There was this researcher who followed a bunch of swimmers across various degrees from high school to college D1 to Olympic champions. And he followed them for a long time to see what is the difference between a high school swimmer, a D1 swimmer, an average swimmer, and an Olympic champion. And he found that it wasn't quantitative. He found, and it's a crazy headline, he found that Olympic champions didn't train more than the average swimmer. They trained differently. So it was a huge qualitative difference about them, not necessarily just in hours and doing the thing. And obviously there's incredible nuance there with that study, but it was how can you do something differently? So all in all, non-conforming traits being attractive, moving differently being the thing that helps you break through. To me, the answer is somewhat simple then, of at least you have to try and see where it leads you.
And it's true. I mean, eventually, I think when you talk about, in my podcast, I remember, you kind of look at, the biggest leaders of our time. And there's like, probably if I need to sum up the podcast, usually it's, I don't know, grit or tenacity or, it's probably like, it's going to sum it up. But let's talk about that for a second, because again, like going through the motions and, you shared one challenge, but sometimes like, I don't feel like doing a podcast today. Like, I don't know if it moves the needle. Like, did you get any doubt? Did you get any hate? Where did that catch you?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. There's still days where I don't want to do it, right? You got to be in the right headspace to do this kind of work, right? Because it is a little bit softer than working in Excel or stocking a warehouse or moving a SKU, right? It's inherently soft. I feel that a lot. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm different. Maybe not everyone responds to this as a catalyst, but for me, like regret is a powerful compass. I think all the time, like it's a compass, right? It's not something I should be averse to. And it's the simplest question of like, would I regret not doing this today? And the answer is usually always yes. And then I do the thing and then I feel good. And in fact, I did an episode recently on using regret as a emotional framework and compass to make decisions makes you more optimistic. Like it has this interesting trickle-down effect that researchers have shown where they had these two groups of people making decisions, small decisions, big decisions. They had one group say, hey, before you make the decision, I want you to think about regret. Will you regret doing or not doing this decision? The other group, they said, hey, what's your decision? And they showed overwhelmingly so that through whatever ways that they measured it, that the group that used regret to make the decision, after they made the decision, they were way more calm, peaceful, and optimistic because they're like, well, I did the reflection and I did the thing. What else can I do? There's nothing else to overthink. So I'm feeling good about this. I feel hopeful about it. And not that will necessarily create the outcome you want, but I want to live with the clarity knowing that I made the right choice and I trusted that I'll deal with whatever happens afterwards. So that's typically how I operate with the idea of regret as a compass. Do the thing and then don't overthink the thing and then move on to the next thing.
I love that you said that. And actually we had Daniel Pink on the podcast, and he has a book about regret. And he actually says people will almost always regret more the things that they didn't do versus the things they did do.
I'm sure that's true, right?
Which is so interesting. Yes. Like, but having like a whole statistics about it is just incredible. So I love that you said that because I don't think I've used that as a tool in the way that you shared. But it's absolutely a motivator. Like it's absolutely the motivator.
I'll give you another one too, that it was a really big catalyst for me in all areas of life, but it started in corporate. There was these group of researchers that followed these workers in corporate jobs over a long period of time. And they basically divided them into two groups of their mindsets. The first group was filled with people who they were it's a dog eat dog world out there. You got to step over some people to be successful. Watch out for yourself. Watch your back. It's all about you. You got to do what you've got to do. That was group one. The other group was people who the mindset was they may trust their default. They trusted that you and I can both be successful. There's enough promotions to go around that if you say you're going to do something, I trust that you're going to do it. Trust is your default. And they showed overwhelmingly so that the trust is your default group made significantly more over the course of their career, was promoted much more frequently, and was happier and more positive. And I always thought that was a pretty interesting thing. Make trust your default. And it's not just trust in other people. It's trust in the industry. It's trust in your sector. It's trust in yourself. I think it's interesting. Make trust your default and just, I don't know, perhaps it'll lead you in the right direction, and perhaps it'll make you less resentful, and perhaps it'll make you more trusting, and perhaps it'll bring more better people into your life, and that is what will make you more money. It's a trickle down effect of that emotion. So make trust your default.
I love that. And I think Gary Vee said, say yes to the maybe, which is also kind of like an interesting trust factor, because it's all about what you said, Case. It's about trusting yourself at the end of the day, because you're the only one who needs to eventually show up again and again, despite the fear, despite the pain, despite everything. You're going to be the person that needs to show up.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go into the millions that you have right now, Case, there will be hate. Did you feel like you needed to create some thick skin for yourself somehow, or not really?
In a sense, yes and no. I mean, I am lucky in that people very much support me, and I tend to occupy a space of the internet that I refer to as hope core, right? So it's not political, it's not lifestyle, it is sharing optimism and helping people feel seen, and the majority of people accept that. A lot of people are in hurt spaces, and when I remind them of something good that they don't have, there is a certain visceral reaction to it, and some people will lash out at me and, say that I don't understand and I'm wrong and I'm privileged and this, that, and the other. And I think, in lieu of developing thick skin, it's more of developing a pause so I don't respond to those type of people, because everything inside of me when someone attacks me is to defend myself. And I think that is what I have developed, because I try to practice what I preach, and that's self-awareness, and to realize that I can say something that someone else does not believe to be true, and I need to accept that fact. But there's still that part of me that wants to defend myself, and I think letting go of that is beautiful.
Right.
And I very rarely respond to anyone, but anytime I do, it's really funny. Sometimes I'll have a lapse in my judgment, and I'll respond to someone who lashes out at me, and someone will DM me, they'll be like "F you" or something, and I'll respond, and I'll just be like, "Hey, something nice." So like, I hope you have a better day or something. I probably shouldn't respond, but overwhelming. So anytime I ever do that, I usually get a DM back a week later, a day later, and the person says, "Hey, sorry, I was just going through a lot. It wasn't personal."
That's true.
It's not like I'm fishing for that as an answer, but it is an interesting observation in light of why people lash out. Usually has nothing to do with me.
It has everything to do with them.
Yeah, of
That's
course.
true.
Of course.
But we need to, get over our instinct to let's bash this.
Yeah, there's power in pausing, and so you just close the app up, move along with your day.
I love it. So if somebody doesn't really know anything about mindfulness, anything about what you do, what are some things that you want them to know?
I alluded to it earlier, but I think there's many beautiful ways to celebrate mindfulness and mindful habits, from meditation to therapy to breath work to just grounding yourself to sound. There's so many modalities nowadays. So don't feel the need to be like, this is mindfulness and this is not mindfulness. The mindfulness that I gravitate towards is all about your emotional vocabulary and how you listen to yourself and how you speak to yourself. And to me, that's the most practical form. So maybe start there. If you're someone who is a little averse and, you're a little cynical of like the woo-woo, that's fine. That's fine. Maybe start with me. Come on over here. The water's warm. Let's start with words. You know words. We know words. Start here. And then if that opens you up, then maybe we could talk a little bit about some visualizations and some belief frameworks, and a little bit, we could throw in some words like abundance, and we could start talking about the, some of the more spiritual elements. Or you could stick around and just do the words. Think about the words. Think about the language. Think about how can you, and think about like the direction. Like, to me, it's not like I want to sit down and practice mindfulness. It's I want to sit down and I want to feel at peace with what I'm feeling. And I want to do that because I want to be hopeful. I don't want to be burdened by my emotions. I want to be optimistic. That's a good motivation. That's the motivation that inspires me to do the work. So maybe it's like, think about what is, not necessarily like what are you trying to accomplish. That's not like outcome oriented, but like what is the direction you want to go? What is the way you want to feel? And then let's work into something that will make you feel that way. It could be a mix of different practices. It could be one practice done every single day. Totally up to you. And that's the beauty of it.
It's interesting, Case, because if you would have caught me, I don't know, like a decade ago, I was in corporate, I would totally roll up my eyes. Like anything mind, related thing, I was just like, this is BS. I don't believe in it. Yeah. Like you either do it or you don't do it. And that is it. Yeah. And I think you alluded to it a little bit. The more you learn or the more you progress, the more you understand how much you don't know. And I think this is exactly where it actually blindsided me completely because the first time I wanted to start Leap Academy, the truth is I didn't miss the strategy. I thought that it was like, I kept blaming people. I don't have the strategy. I don't have the strategy. It wasn't the strategy. The fear was numbing. It was all my mindset, right? Like all I needed to do and say, I got to write this post because this is what I want to do now. And the fear was just overwhelming. And it is all mindset. It's all, so I think it was interesting to see even my pattern around what you're just sharing. And if somebody's rolling up their eyes, like I would just want to say, I hear you. And it's incredible how much I didn't know.
Yeah. And I see it a lot too. Like I'm lucky. I basically speak for a living and I do these, I call them mantra, where I come in and I basically do these guided reflection sessions. I do them for the NFL. So I do them for a room through of 300 men who hit each other for a living. I do them for corporate groups all the time. I did one in New York the other day for a PR firm that was 70 women. It was all women, not a man in sight. I do them for realty groups. I do them for all different types of sectors, from all men to women to everything in between. And I'm not drinking my own Kool-Aid to think I'm like the miracle maker, but every single time it is engaging for these people because it allows people to interact with their emotions in a way that they haven't before. And I always see some type of breakthrough. So I think a lot of it sometimes is like we are averse to the things that we haven't tried. And I understand that. That was certainly me. But it's a beautiful thing to see a room full of grown athletes talk about their feelings, as is to see a bunch of realtors do the same thing, to a bunch of salespeople. Like it is a universal language that if you just can put yourself in the position to at least try to receive it, you'll get something out of it. It might not change your world immediately, but you will get something out of it that will trickle until perhaps it helps you break through. So maybe I'm just patting myself on my back for saying I'm doing the right thing, but I don't know. I see it in these sessions. And to me, it really inspires me to continue to do them.
Right. No, and I love it. I kind of like to end with maybe a little reflection. Speaking of, like if you would have yourself earlier on in your career, what would you say to yourself? What are some of the things that you wish you'd known?
The one that I come back to that's become a little bit of a soundbite that I repeat because I wish I would have told myself this. In light of all the examples set for us, in light of all the pressure put on us, all the expectations put on us, all the social media shown to us, I would have told myself, I would have said, there's no right way to live your life, but there's a wrong way. And the wrong way is to think that there's a right way. That is, we live in an amazing time where there is no right way to build a career. I share my feelings for a living. I literally share my feelings for a living, and I do well for myself. In the same way that there's no right way to be a musician, a salesperson, an artist. Like there's no right way. There's many examples set for you, but we live in an incredible time, and it's only going to get crazier with AI and on all the crazy things that are happening. I just wish I would have gone back and said, Case, you don't have to go down this path because it's what your parents told you to do. You don't have to do this thing because that's the path to a promotion. How can you think differently? Back to our conversation about different. Yeah. So there is no universal right way. In fact, there is a wrong way. The wrong way is to think that there's a universal right way, especially in light of all the amazing things we could do to stir the pot and do things differently. So I certainly would have leaned into that advice a little bit. Be inspired by other people. Absolutely. Try to surround yourself with people who can educate you and inspire you. Get a mentor. Absolutely. But realize the gift it is to figure out what works for you and not to pigeonhole yourself necessarily by the burden of other people's expectations or paths, and just celebrate that freedom.
I love every word that you just said, and I would totally tap into that. Like, I think the possibilities right now are mind-blowing.
It's crazy.
And just going to accelerate in a way that is hard to describe. And there's so many options on the menu, and most people don't even know what's on the menu. And I think, just tapping into that and not feeling like, I'm trying to tell it to my kids, not feeling like you have to get this like one thing right in college, and that is the like going to dictate the rest of your life. No, it won't. Like, just do your best and create grit and love people and trust, and so all the things. So it's beautiful. Well,
thank you,
Case. I love it. Anything that you want to share with our audience? I mean, we'll obviously have all the cool links, and
thank you.
But anything you want to share with our audience before we hop off.
No, I appreciate you giving me a platform to talk about the things I'm passionate about. I mean, I genuinely love and feel privileged to be able to do this professionally and then, have a great conversation with someone new in my life and to talk about it. So being here is a gift and I appreciate it. And, if people want to listen to the podcast or pick up the book or read any of the quotes, I hope it brings you something into your life that you already knew, but it makes it click in a way that you're like, oh, I get it now. That would be the biggest gift for me. So I appreciate that.
And I want for everybody else to just see the possibilities, right? You can take bold moves. You can leap to other things and you can create an incredible, incredible life for yourself based on something you love. Case, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
More episodes that you're going to love are right around the corner. So definitely make sure to click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, who in your life should see this today? Do share this with them. This will inspire and help those you care about and helps us continue to bring amazing guests. And I will see you there.